Today's session is Making It Work. My name is Petro. I'm the founder of Teach Through Love, and today I want to talk about the 5 R's because I feel like these really encapsulate where we find our biggest parenting challenges. So today I want to talk about how we can guide our children to be self-disciplined and not feel like we're always applying discipline. And so we can start to let go of the idea that punishment and consequences are what's needed to shift behavior or to get our kids to be self-motivated. So I want to move and shift our idea around discipline. I want to stop thinking of discipline as the punishments and consequences that we think we need to apply so that our kids learn lessons. And really I want to shift to how do we get kids to be self-motivated? How do we get our children to want to contribute to the household, to want to do their chores, to want to complete their homework, to want to be kind to their siblings, and to show appreciation? I know that I don't want to have to run around disciplining my child with this power over mentality where I think that she needs to be trained or controlled or she's never going to learn to do things, because that's a lot of responsibility for me, unnecessarily, I think. I think parents take on that responsibility of micromanaging things, or they're afraid that their kids won't be self-disciplined. They won't learn, that they'll just run amok. And it's true that as the bigger adults, we can control kids for a certain amount of time. We can use punishments and rewards to compel our kids. But we have to ask ourselves, what is the price that we're paying? Is it worth the risk? Is it worth the risk to our relationships? Is it worth the risk to their motivation? Let's talk about regulation next. Regulation is one of the biggest areas where I think we find challenges. Sometimes I think we expect too much. We expect little children to not have meltdowns and to not get really upset, but we have to remember that kids are really ruled by their emotions, especially in those early years, and that they're learning to mature those parts of their brain so that they can have some impulse control, so that they can have some physical control of their bodies. But they need lots and lots and lots of emotional support and empathy and tools to do that. When we have issues with regulation, sometimes it can be stemming from anger, stored anger. Sometimes we can have aggressive kids. That anger can either be, outward or inward. You may see longer tantrums, anxiety. But any of these stress reactions, what we have here is we have a regulatory issue, and we have some stored stress. And this stress could be simply coming, there really can be coming from so many areas. It really just depends on your family. There can be things like separation, work, financial stress, moving, divorce, and then on the line up to more severe things like illness, death. Sometimes there are foods that are affecting kids, their nervous system, their ability to regulate their bodies, and there's a lot of anxiety coursing through them. Sometimes it's just temperament. There's so many different areas. What we need to do is we need to make sure that we are recognizing when there's stress going on and when temperament is playing a role in the level of stress or tension in our kids, and be aware of how we're contributing to that. Your child is going to be on high alert if there's a lot of tension in the home, if there's a lot of fighting, or if there's a lot of angry or harsh tones. Sometimes we're even unaware of how we sound, and it's affecting our kids. There was a recent study that showed that babies were having stress reactions while they were asleep because they were hearing their parents fighting. So we have to recognize that the antenna of a child is so perceptive and aware. And these energies will manifest, or the tension in the air will manifest unconsciously in our kids and in their behaviors. So this isn't to say that we don't feel stress. Of course, we want to make sure that we are limiting the stress, that we're not living in states of chronic toxic stress. And we want to make sure that how are we modeling for our children the expression of our anger, and how are we modeling for our children that management of stress. When we get dysregulated, we have a stress reaction. That's a normal physiological response to a demand for change on our system, right? We have maybe a real or perceived threat, and then we act accordingly. But how are we acting? How are we managing our stress? Are we flying off the handle at other people or at our children? Because that's what they're going to model. So some tips for regulation. Know your child's window of tolerance. A day of shopping and then lunch or really long play dates or lots of social interaction with friends can cause some kids to have meltdowns. They can cause a lot of overstimulation or too many hours of sensory input for some kids. Know your kid. Be really in tune with how your kid processes everything, from the physical food he eats to the emotional environments that you step into to physical demands placed upon him. Know your kid, because then you can be proactive. That's the way we're going to set ourselves up for success 90% of the time, is by being proactive. We can't avoid all stress, but we can prepare our kids to deal with it. We can make sure that we provide ourselves with extra time or extra resources or whatever we need to get through the situation, and not just expect our kids to get through it because they have to, but really make sure that we provide some guidance. Sometimes kids need to be walked through what's going to happen so that they can manage their anxiety around new situations. If you have a child with any kind of special need or anxiety or stress or trauma, they're going to need a lot of preparation around new situations, even just sensitive kids. So instead of forcing kids to just get over it or adapt and not providing them any tools but verbal encouragement, or what we think is verbal encouragement but can sort of come off as bullying, emotional bullying, and not because we're intending to bully anyone. But know your child. Know their temperament and what they can handle and what they need. And if you don't know, start to create stories, start to find out, start to investigate with your kids, not by interrogating them, but through play. When you have children that are aggressive, you don't want to ask questions or interrogate with things like, why would you do that? What were you thinking? Because kids who are in that aggressive state, they're acting from their survival brain, from the lower, more primitive centers of their brain. So they don't know. There really is never a good reason for hitting your sister or hitting your friend, right? So we don't really need to ask these questions anyway. That's why I ask. Kids who misbehave weren't making cognitive choices. They were reacting to the emotional context of their experience. And we need to teach them to manage that area. That's why I focus so much on emotions, because they contribute to so much to behavior. And that emotional overwhelm can lead to confusion, fear, and that just leads to poor decision making. When kids are angry, when they're aggressive, when they're having regulation issues, connect with them emotionally and help them communicate their feelings and needs. When you hit your brother, I imagine that you were feeling really angry. I'm wondering if that's true. If your kid says, I don't know, and they reject you, or they say, go away, stay with it. Don't feel that rejection. Feel it, but then let it go and know that it's not your child trying to push you away, but it's them trying to self-protect. Know when to move in closer and know when to hold back. Know when your child's receptive to more, when you can push a little. Say, okay, you know what? I want to understand, but it's okay if you don't want to talk about it right now. Maybe it's too much. But I know that you didn't mean to hurt anybody intentionally, so I want to help you with whatever's going on. How safe might your child feel if he hears that, instead of being criticized, yelled at, or punished for being out of control emotionally and physically? If he knows that he's unconditionally loved even when his behavior is unacceptable, then he grows to be able to share with you those innermost fears. Some kids are really scared to share their feelings, one, because they don't even know how to put it into words, and two, because they don't want to be rejected or judged or blamed, or hear, well, I understand that you were sad, but you still can't hit. That's true, but how does that feel when someone says that to you? And this isn't about just making our kids feel good. This is about teaching them to access how to feel good, because when they feel good, they can make better decisions. You want kids to feel that trust so that they can share with you what made them get to that place of poor decision making or uncontrolled actions. Our only other choice is really to come in and hand out consequences, play the judge, and then declare who was right and who was wrong. And then, say, okay, that's it until the next conflict. And then you have to come in and do it all over again. But then you run around managing kids. And kids who are managed give up even trying to assert their own will or do things for themselves. I know that dysregulation, and when kids have trouble regulating their emotions, and when they're hitting or biting or yelling or slamming doors or breaking things, I know that these emotional responses can seem really overwhelming, and it's hard to be patient with them as they pass, as we move through these stages and develop their ability to be resilient. But this is where you'll find that self-care piece is really important, for you to take care of yourself so that you can have the reserves to handle what comes. We want to be careful not to discipline for emotional responses, because this can really further shame a child and further dysregulate them, and then it really drives a wedge between us and our relationship. Emotions are not behaviors that need punishing. They need tolerance and understanding, and they'll lead us to new places. They'll open us up to solutions. Once we are able to manage our emotions, our perspective opens up. And we're able to reflect on our actions. Once we feel that empathy, we're able to soothe our systems. That's really what it's about. When our kids are having regulatory issues, how can we soothe their system? Make sure that you have, one, investigated how your child calms down best, because not every kid calms down in the same way. And then provide tools for your children to get that stress out. Sensory boxes, sand tables, water tables, Play-Doh. We found this like foam stuff that my daughter, that we play games with, and she uses it when she's really mad, because you can kind of squeeze it and it just molds into any shape that you want. And she loves squeezing things when she gets her stress out. Some kids need to run around. Some kids will benefit by a bike ride. Older kids may benefit by our connection. Let's go for a walk. Let's play a card game. We want to make sure that we're building respect by having respect for our kids when they get into those places that aren't so pretty, that aren't so kind. We want to bring them out by reminding them of the kindness inside. That's how we build respect. Respect is another area where we find a lot of challenge. But we want to, again, look back at what kind of environment are we setting up for our kids? How do they feel? Do they know their place in the family? Do they feel like they matter, like they have an important role, like they have a contribution? Or do they feel controlled, blamed, demanded upon? We want our kids to feel welcome, to feel inspired, and to feel free to be creative and be curious and be involved in their world. I think respect should be unconditional, and respect doesn't mean that we always kiss our elders, or that we always show affection to our elders, or that we always do what people say. Respect means that I value what you have to say. I may not agree with it, but I value it because I value you. We may not agree with the behavioral actions of our kids, but we should never allow the dignity of our children to be compromised. Discipline never has to come at the cost of disrespecting our children. But often that's what we do. And I think it's because we are feeling a lack of self-respect, or we are feeling like we never got a lot of respect. So it's easy to want to control a smaller, less powerful person to gain something that we think we deserve. So let's think about how we ask our kids to meet their responsibilities. Do we yell, "Breakfast now!" without thought for what the child might be doing right in that moment? And then when our child demands our attention, even when we're maybe in the middle of a phone conversation, or we're sending an email, or we're making dinner, maybe we're making an important call, how do we respond? Do we stop what we're doing right then and answer him? When our kids notice that they haven't been given that same courtesy that we expect from them, they don't get very good at extending that courtesy. And disrespect usually comes from, I don't feel heard, I don't feel seen, I don't feel valued, I don't feel recognized. But can we turn that disrespect around, and can we hear and see the other person's pain? This is how we shift it. Of course, we want to watch our attitude, our language, and our tone. We want to make sure that we give kids some choice and autonomy around their world, so that they don't have to guard their resources and guard every decision that they do get to make. So make sure you give your kids a lot of choice. Family meetings is a great tool to implement. This is where we come together to share our feelings, our preferences, our upsets, our ideas, new rules. This is where we come together to maybe manage conflict that we couldn't manage in the moment because we couldn't handle it because we were too upset, but now we're ready to talk about it. And kids as young as 3 and 4, they can participate in family meetings. We don't have to make them long, drawn-out sessions. It's really great to create tradition, to create consistency, and to have this ritual where kids know that this is the place. I know that I can come and share on Sundays after dinner or on Friday nights, and then we're going to all, watch a movie together. It's family fun night, and I know that we have our family meetings before. When kids know that they have a place that they're going to be able to offload that's safe and secure and where they won't be blamed or yelled at or judged or shamed, it helps them get through their week. It helps them get through conflict. You know what? I'm going to have a chance to explore this later. So take this week, let go a little bit, see where you can start to shift, see where your biggest challenges are. I want you to write down some goals. Write down 3 goals this week. where you can create more consistency and cooperation. That is our lesson for this week. Take care, make it a great one, and don't forget to check out our support calls where you'll get lots of great tips and tools from parents actually experiencing all kinds of challenges in these very areas.